of seven.
On this best of seven series
of a best of seven series.
Welcome to the Best of Seven podcast.
Oh, didn't catch you there. Brandon Plant here from the Best of Seven podcast. Just getting ready for the baseball edition of the Best of Seven podcast. Learned quite a bit from the Houston Astros, who really like to drum on their roof, in the dugout, or garbage cans. You know, they like to cheat because the Astros are cheaters. Welcome to episode number 5 of the Best of Seven podcast. I am your host, Brandon Plant from SENS. In this episode, we are going to discuss the baseball free agency period, the trades, and of course, who we think will make the postseason, who are the pretenders, contenders, etc. So Noah, how are you doing?
Honestly, pretty good. Staying home, staying safe, washing my hands, not touching my face. Just make sure you guys stay home.
Stay home, and if you need to go out, be very careful. But if you don't need to go out, stay home, stay safe, stay healthy. Some sports news in the last week. So Columbus, they signed the goaltender, Jonas Corposalo, to a 2-year contract extension. Before Elvis Lincoln stepped in and kept Columbus in playoff contention, he really started off the year hot. You remember Tortorella blowing up after Corposalo got injured. A well-earned contract extension for the goaltender Jonas Corposalo as well. First overall, Sabrina Ionescu out of Oregon. She goes to the WNBA's New York Liberty. Congratulations to her and her family. That is phenomenal. I watched her play with the Oregon Ducks in the NCAA. She has some serious skill. Continuing on with the WNBA center, Stephanie Dolson contracted COVID-19. Thoughts and prayers with her. Hopefully she gets through it. As well, the NBA, the players in the National Basketball Association are going to take a 25% pay cut as of May 15th. That is as they're trying to figure out some way to restart or continue the season. But right now, that's not really in the cards. They're taking it day by day. It's not looking good for a season to resume anytime soon. So they're going to cut some payroll to try to save some money while they're losing quite a bit. On this day in history, this Saturday, April 18th, Wayne Gretzky played his final National Hockey League game at Madison Square Garden in New York. Interesting fact, the game before he played was in Ottawa, the last game he ever played in Canada. He got an assist in that game, I believe, and a round of applause. So congratulations to the great one, Wayne Gretzky, on, of course, a phenomenal career. An interesting little sports history there. Finally, to the National Football League, where linebacker Von Miller, one of the best in the NFL, tested positive for COVID-19. The linebacker out of Denver, for the Denver Broncos, has COVID-19. He says he's okay. Hopefully it continues to be that way, and hopefully he pulls through and recovers in a speedy fashion. In unfortunate news, former National Football League quarterback Tavarius Jackson passed away tragically in a car crash. Our thoughts and prayers with him and his family at this time. Going to the National Hockey League, where Winnipeg Jets defenseman Dustin Byfuglien terminated his contract with the Winnipeg Jets after months of negotiations and rumors of it happening. It finally has happened. He's free to sign with any team now, as he is a free agent. He has some history with injuries and is a little older and hasn't played in the NHL in almost a year. So those might be factors into why he doesn't get a contract. But honestly, if he can show teams they can stay up to NHL level and play at the level of NHL, I don't see how he can't get a contract. No, I don't think you can disagree with this. Byfuglien is a talented player.
He's a talented player for sure.
Now, like the drumming in the beginning of the show, let's get to baseball with some pickups, some trades, and of course some talk. Noah, do you want to open it up?
Sure. First, big blockbuster trade, of course. Red Sox sending Mookie Betts to the Dodgers. It's weird because he had like a off season last year, 29 home runs, 80 RBIs.
Off-season, yeah.
That just shows of how good of a caliber player he is. He's very skilled, great outfielder for Boston, and now that he's with the Dodgers, I mean, of course, he goes to the Dodgers. There have been all these superstars that have gone to the Dodgers the past few years, like Manny Machado, but the Dodgers are going to be good again. They have Mookie Betts, and I'm not surprised that the Dodgers traded for him at all. They're going to be really good.
The Dodgers are a team where they will throw money at anything if it has a chance of winning the World Series. The fact this team got screwed over with the Astros winning it over them, obviously they should have won that series after looking at the fact that Kershaw and Maeda and all of them were ticked off. Like they all their pitches were known before they were even thrown. So it's an completely unfair advantage the Astros had in that series. That's why I hit that drum. However, Mookie Betts is a free agent at the end of this season. That's why the Red Sox traded him. They're trying to slash some payroll. That's for a whole other conversation. But if I'm the Dodgers, 29 home runs, 80 RBIs is always fantastic. But the fact that that's an off year for Mookie Betts, if the MLB season returns, he's going to do big things, great things for sure. And for the Red Sox, it's just good that they got something back for a guy they were probably going to release anyways. Moving forward now with the outfielders, as Mookie Betts was the right fielder. Now let's get to the center fielder. Starlin Marte was traded to the Arizona Diamondbacks. Noah, I like Starlin Marte. I liked him on the Pirates. What do you think about this?
Yeah, he was always one of the shining stars of the Pittsburgh Pirates. They haven't really been that good for a little while during Starling Marte's tenure. But, I mean, he's a really good center fielder. He's got lots of power, lots of pop. He can hit the ball. I have no problem with this for the Diamondbacks. And the Diamondbacks, we'll talk about them a bit later, but they've always been they've been lingering in the standings. They're always there, but not quite up there. But maybe this move can put them over the top.
Yeah, honestly, I liked what Arizona's doing. We'll get to a couple other moves later. But overall, last year they kind of were a surprise. Didn't end up making the postseason, but they were expected to be one of the worst in the MLB. It ended up being one of the better teams in the Major League Baseball. And, Starlin Marte is not a crappy player to add to a team that's desperate for more runs and more offense. Arizona really produced well last year. There's some question marks with a couple of players that really produced more than was expected. But Marte is a solid player, outfielder, great defensively. And Arizona, I don't know if they're going to make the postseason, but they're going to be in the conversation bubble once again for sure.
So next we'll go to Corey Kluber. The last trade we'll talk about here, he got traded to the Texas Rangers. He obviously did not play a lot last year. He had 7 starts in 2019, but in 2018 he had 20 wins and 229 strikeouts, which is very, very good numbers. He also had a 2.89 ERA, and that just shows Corey Kluber is a great pitcher. Everyone knows this. He had some injury problems last year. He had a history of problems with injuries before. But that being said, he is added to a pretty good Texas Rangers pitching core. Lance Lynn, Mike Minor, they could make some noise. They're a dark horse this year. They've traded away a little bit of the hitting. They lost Nomar Mazara as well, but I could see the Texas Rangers in the playoffs this season.
I do not like Texas. I will not lie. I'm not a fan of the Texas Rangers. As a Blue Jays fan in that 2015 series, which is probably one of the best series Major League Baseball seen in years, Bautista home run, bat flip, for example. The rivalry there was insane. But I have to give credit where credit is due. And Texas is building a team that excites me. I don't think they're going to make the postseason. Maybe that's a little bit of a bias, but I think their division's really good. But Kluber, former Cy Young winner, 229 shutouts in 2018, had some injury problems last year, but if they can rekindle and get back the excitement Kluber brings to a lineup and the dominance that he has, solid for the Rangers. And it was not even a big price to pay for him, so good for the Rangers for sure. Now let's move forward now to the largest deal in Major League Baseball history for a pitcher. The largest pitcher contract ever. Garrett Cole. A 9-year deal, $324 million. $324 for 9 years, Garrett Cole. He had 20 wins, a 2.50 ERA, 326 shutouts last year. Utter domination when he is with the Astros. Noah, what I'll say here is the Yankees are ready and they want to win. I think that's pretty clear with a signing like Garrett Cole, the best pitcher in Major League Baseball perhaps. Noah, this is a home run deal for the Yankees. There's no exception about that.
100% it's a home run deal. They've been trying to win for a few years now. They've gotten a little snake bitten by those Houston Astros, but a couple years ago they got Giancarlo Stanton.
They're good buddy. The drum really helped the Astros out on that series.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we could still say that Garrett Cole is probably the best pitcher in the MLB. The trash can banging did not help Garrett Cole at all, unfortunately. So we could just say that Garrett Cole is, in my opinion, is the best pitcher in the MLB. And now that he's going to the Yankees, they're just getting even more stacked. They have a really good hitting core. If Giancarlo Stanton and Miguel Andujar didn't get injured last year, they could have done a lot better than they did.
If Aaron Judge stays healthy this year too, with the rest of the Bombers in the Bronx, watch out. The Yankees might get their first championship in over 10 years. Moving forward now with a guy that the Nationals really wanted to keep, but they had to pick him, or they had to pick Strasburg to pick Strasburg. So now Anthony Rendon, he's going to the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim. meeting up with his buddy Mike Trout on a 7-year deal for $245 million for the third baseman, a huge deal for him after a breakout year, 34 home runs, 126 ribbies, and a .319 batting average in 2019. Noah, Anthony Rendon is what the Angels really want, and they really need it. They finally give another star player with Mike Trout, and that team finally has a chance to actually compete for a playoff spot and not just be a bubble mediocre team.
For sure. Mike Trout has been on his own for hitting in the past 5-6 years, and now that he's got a superstar level third baseman, Anthony Rendon. This is a great move. If the Angels sort of address their pitching a little bit more, they have found a couple of diamonds in the rough. Like Andrew Heaney has really blossomed into a decent starting pitcher, but it's not. I don't think it'll be enough for the Angels yet. But I think in 2021, in the next season after, they could be really good with a couple of moves. But Anthony Rendon is a really good start.
All I can say about this is this gives me flashbacks to Albert Pujols signing with the Angels. Hopefully, love Pujols, legendary player, phenomenal player, but hopefully that contract really is worth it, and hopefully Rendon keeps the production he has right now for the foreseeable future, because Pujols sort of quieted down. So hopefully Rendon doesn't, and hopefully he continues to dominate MLB pitchers. Speaking of MLB pitchers, his buddy in Washington who got his money, Steven Strasburg, stays in Washington. He signed a $245 million deal for 7 years. So like I said, he got Rendon's money. The Nationals chose Strasburg over Rendon to keep. It's a $35 million average. In 2019, he got 18 wins, 251 shutouts, 3.32 ERA, and of course, a World Series. So pretty good player, one of the best pitchers in the game. And this was the biggest baseball contract to a pitcher in the history of baseball until Garrett Cole got signed, of course. But Strasburg is an important player in that Nationals organization, and he should help them compete again next year.
It was the right move. It was a tough choice to make, but that pitching core with Corbin and Strasburg and Scherzer, it's so much. You can't lose one of those pieces. And now that the Nationals have that same insane pitching core, and they are going to be almost probably just as good next year, maybe a little bit worse now that they've lost Rendon. But I can see the Nationals right back in a deep postseason run next season.
Can't disagree with that. No, I'll let you take the next one because you have some family there.
Sure. Zach Wheeler going to the Phillies. I'm not necessarily a Phillies fan, but my whole family surely is. 11 wins, 3.96 ERA. So he had a rough season with the New York Mets, but he did have 195 strikeouts and 195 innings pitched. So he is a strikeout throwing pitcher. He did sign that 5-year contract. It was worth $118 million. It reminds me too much of the Jake Arrieta signing from 2 years ago now. I really hope for the Phillies that this can work, and unlike the Jake Arrieta signing where he's sort of forgettable now, I hope the Zach Wheeler signing works. I just still get that vibe from the Phillies that they're not going to make it, and they've thrown too much money. They also signed Didi Gregorius to a 1-year contract, and they're just loading up, which is great. But what I think was the biggest move for the Phillies in the offseason was firing their manager, Gabe Kapler, and getting Joe Girardi into the helm, an actual hard-nosed baseball manager.
For sure.
That might be the ticket to the postseason.
What I think is the problem in Philadelphia, they haven't addressed it in years. It's that bullpen. It implodes every single big game that they're in, and that's really the reason they didn't make the postseason last year. They had the offense to do it. They had the starting pitching to do it. They have decent pitchers. Zach Wheeler is a good pitcher. The money's a little steep in my opinion, but the market was set, and the Phillies had no choice. I think if the Phillies allocated a little bit more money to the bullpen, I would put them as legitimate contenders to make the postseason, maybe even make a little bit of a run. They have the talent to do it. Unfortunately, they don't have the talent in the bullpen to do it. I don't see them doing really anything spectacular this year unless Girardi can really get the boys going. But yeah, Wheeler is a solid pitcher, but there needs to be more development and more money put into that bullpen.
Yeah, agreed, because they just I don't – there was part of me that was like, why did they make this move for Zach Wheeler? They could have – if Hector Neris is your best relief pitcher, then you kind of have a little bit of a problem in the bullpen. And I just think that they could have used that money towards like a Will Harris who was on free agency. There were other relief pitchers who were also there. They can make trades. They can make depth signings even. Yeah. Like that's what a relief pitcher is. It's all depth. And
just something.
It wasn't the right signing at the time, but now that they have made that signing, you got to just hope it works.
Yeah, if you're a Phillies fan, hopefully your talent will overcome the issues in the back end of the bullpen. But, miracles happen. The Blue Jays last year were that great, and 2 years ago they were even worse, and their bullpen still played well. So there is a chance to get guys on cheap deals that can really perform. And you should look at teams like the Blue Jays if they don't do well this year, and they'll have some decent options in the bullpen, looking for a team like Philadelphia to try to plug their holes with guys like that. Moving forward now to the bringer of rain, Josh Donaldson, the third baseman, signs a mega deal with the Minnesota Twins, a 4-year contract worth $92 million guaranteed with a club option of 2024. Donaldson will receive $21 million per season from 2020 to 2023, while the $16 million club option for 2024 includes an $8 million buyout. In 2019, the bringer of rain brought 37 dingers, 94 ribbies, and a 379 OBP. Noah, the bringer of rain, he's in Minnesota, trying to bring some more rain there. What do you think about this one?
It's an extra big piece to that hitting core in Minnesota. They've had some problems with once they get to the postseason or once they get good that they can't do anything past that. They've lost to the Yankees a few times now in the postseason, who have just shown that they're the better team. Maybe this could be it for the Minnesota Twins, maybe with some development of their younger pieces as well. I could see the Minnesota Twins taking that extra step, but they need their pieces to perform, and that includes this mega deal player, Josh Donaldson.
Completely agree. That team came out of nowhere last year, hitting, I believe at a certain point, the most home runs in the whole American League or Major League Baseball as a whole. That's surprising when you got teams like the Yankees in the AL. Wow. But overall, the Twins add a legitimate superstar at third base. That team is solid. They have decent pitching. They have a good bullpen, I think. And there's no argument with this one. It's a good deal for the Twins, as long as he can stay healthy, of course. The Twins are going to do damage next year unless they run to the Yankees. Then the Yankees are probably going to stump them again. But I think the Twins are an interesting team to look at for sure. For sure.
You want to take this one? Or
I'll take it. Speaking of interesting teams, Bumgarner, Mr. Bum, Madison Bumgarner to the Arizona Diamondbacks. Kind of a shocking deal. 5 years at $85 million, a 3.90 ERA, 207.2 innings pitched, and 202 strikeouts in the last season. Bumgarner used to be one of the most dominant players in Major League Baseball. He's still a solid 2-3 guy in your rotation. He still has some good stuff, and he can really do damage when it comes to postseason because he has that postseason experience. He is a World Series champion, and I think the Diamondbacks are trying to take another step. I think that's apparent with a few moves they've made this year. They're trying to make the postseason, and I think this move will definitely help move the needle to playoff contention than just playoff utility.
Yeah, Madison Bumgarner, I think, is a good move. But let's just leave the money part aside. He is a World Series champion with the San Francisco Giants. He had an under 4 ERA, which is decent. He still pitched 200 plus innings this year. He had 200 plus strikeouts, so he still has stuff in the tank for sure. But I don't think he's that ace that he used to be. But the Arizona Diamondbacks have some decent pitchers. They can mix around that rotation. I think it's a good add for the Arizona Diamondbacks just to get that experience that they desperately needed.
I agree. The experience is going to be key, and I think that's the key point of this signing as a whole is the experience that Bumgarner brings to the Arizona Diamondbacks organization, who has a lot of young players there who are really playing well and coming out of nowhere. Moving forward, starting pitcher Hyun Jin Ryu to your Toronto Blue Jays on a 4-year, $80 million contract. Noah and I were in Mexico when this deal went down. I sort of lost my crap. Could not believe the Blue Jays actually won their sweepstakes on one of the best pitchers in Major League Baseball. The guy had a 2.32 ERA and a 14-5 record last year, 163 strikeouts, Hyun Jin Ryu, when healthy, is one of the most dominant pitchers in Major League Baseball and one of the best left-handers. On the Dodgers, he was completely unhittable, and it concerns me a bit for a guy that doesn't really throw the heat. There's a lot of changeups and stuff. Coming into a division, the AL East, with the teams like the Rays and shallower ballparks and the Yankees, the Red Sox, you got to worry a bit about can they take advantage of the softer pitches. but I think Hyun-Jin Ryu has enough talent to overcome that. And I think he's going to be a solid guy to lead the bullpen, the rotation in Toronto. It's the first step for the Blue Jays to be real contenders. And I'm really excited about this one. I'm excited to see him in the blue and white as a Toronto Blue Jay. Noah, what do you think about Hyun-Jin Ryu coming to Canada?
Yeah, it's a good move. I don't think the Jays are in that contending window just yet. They can get there in the next season or the season after that, maybe 2022. But that being said, he is not a strikeout pitcher, but he has shown that you do not have to be a massive strikeout pitcher like Garrett Cole or Justin Verlander to be successful in the MLB. He had a 14-5 record, under 2.5 ERA. This guy can throw the ball, and he can make sure that the other team will not score a lot of runs, whether it's ground balls, fly balls, whatever it is. I have that same fear as you that he's going to the AL East. Even the Blue Jays park is a very hitters-friendly park, but I think that they needed some pitching. Like, their pitchers have been they've been bringing up guys from AAA Buffalo that no one's ever heard of before.
Wagon's back, baby.
Haven't worked. The experiences, those experiments have not worked, and it's good that they bring a big name. It brings some hype to the fan base, which is also something they've needed ever since they lost the bringer of rain, Josh Donaldson.
Yeah, I think the hype part of that aspect is huge because the Blue Jays are trying to bring the hype back into Toronto. The Toronto Raptors, God bless them, very happy, just won a championship in the National Basketball Association. The Maple Leafs, of course, are losing in the first round, but their fans are loyal always. And, of course, you got the other teams in Toronto who are doing really well. For the Blue Jays, this is necessary to get the eyes back on them. They want the world, Canada, to remember, we're here, we're good. Bo Bichette. You got Vladimir Guerrero. You got Rowdy Tellez, Teoscar Hernandez. All these prospects that the Blue Jays have. Kevin Biggio
as well, Mr. Double.
Yeah, he was a little inconsistent, but I have high hopes for him. The Blue Jays have a young, strong core, and I don't see why this year they can't take that step forward, and the next few years take the next steps to be a legitimate contender. And adding on to the next steps to make that rotation legitimate, Tanner Roark signs with the Toronto Blue Jays on a 2-year, $24 million deal. $12 million per year. It's a little steep for a guy like Tanner Roark, who went under the radar. 4.35 ERA, 158 shutouts, strikeouts, 165.1 innings pitched. Tanner Roark is a pitcher that went under the radar. He's a solid third, fourth rotational type of guy. He will get you wins. He will get you strikeouts. But for $12 million a year, it's a little steep. But if you're a team like the Blue Jays, you have to pay a little bit more to get the talent to come to you. So I understand why it was a $12 million per year deal. Noah, Tanner Roark, what are your thoughts?
Tanner Roark, he'll be a depth guy in the rotation. I don't expect much from Tanner Roark. Like, he had a shaky season, but that's to be expected from a guy who's going to be third or fourth in the rotation. Yeah. He'll be okay. He won't emerge as an ace pitcher, but he also, I think he'll be sturdy, a stable pitcher. And that's what the Blue Jays have needed in their organization. Exactly. They struggled with inconsistent pitchers like Marco Estrada has had his up and downs in the past couple of years. Aaron Sanchez with his broken fingers. You got Marcus Stroman, who was always up there, but he was on his own. And that was a big downfall for the Toronto Blue Jays. Yeah,
I agree. And once they got rid of all three, with Stroman going to the Mets and Sanchez going to the Houston Astros, and of course Estrada, I think he's out of baseball now, is with Oakland, I think, a while ago, last year. I think once all those guys were gone and they just revamped the whole rotation, they needed guys like this. So good for the Blue Jays. They're going to take the next step, in my opinion. Let's move forward now with the catcher position with the White Sox, who are an interesting team to look at. Yasmani Grandal, one of the best catchers in Major League Baseball centers. He hit 28 home runs and got 77 RBIs last year, both career highs in the last season. Noah, Yasmani Grandal, a very good catcher, and the White Sox finally get a guy in free agency who should bring excitement to the team and maybe is the first step into bringing that team in Chicago to another World Series.
Yeah, I think I'm really high on Yasmani Grandal. I think he's a top 5 catcher in this league. He can rake 28 home runs. Obviously, he can hit the ball. There are other guys like Real Muto, Mitch Garver that can really hit homers and get consistent offense. But Yasmani Grandal showed last year that he can be that as well. They traded away their catcher, Omar Narvaez, right before, so you kind of expected some big splash at the catcher position. But we did not expect Yasmani Grandal, but here he is in Chicago. They've made a couple signings. We'll talk about the next one in a second. That could bring some hype to that fan base. They have a really young core. They have like guys like Yoan Moncada, Eloy Jimenez, guys like that. They can really elevate this team with some development. And I'll just leapfrog here into the next one. We got Dallas Keuchel, who's on the tail end of his career, just saying, but he also goes to the White Sox. He signed a 3-year deal worth $55.5 million. It's a steep price for a guy who showed a lot of regression last year with the Braves. He played half a season last year because he was just in free agency for a really long time, but then the Braves picked him up. And so he had 91 strikeouts in 112 innings. So he's not a big strikeout guy. But if you could just keep the ball on the ground, keep it in the air, don't let it get out too much, I think he could be a steady, kind of like Tanner Roark, but a little bit elevated, like a third guy in the rotation, not like a star.
I think Dallas Keuchel is a washed-up version. I'm not saying he's washed up. He's still a phenomenal pitcher. But compared to Hyun-Jin Ryu, both left-handers, both throw the curveball, changeup, etc. He's sort of the lesser version of Hyun-Jin Ryu, in my opinion. Not taking anything away from Dallas Keuchel, he's still a really good pitcher with a lot of experience. I think what this move brings to Chicago is a legitimate rotation. Now they have a couple of nice guys there, and now they add Dallas Keuchel. I think there's a little bit of concern because the ballpark's a little bit shallower there, but he did play in Atlanta. So if he can keep the ball a little bit in there, he should be able to keep the ball in the ballpark in Chicago. No issues for this one. I think all it is good depth for a rotation that looks like Chicago's trying to take the next step, sort of like the Blue Jays, sort of like, the Rays. These teams are all trying to get into the postseason. I don't think the White Sox are there yet, but this move certainly will help make their case. Moving forward now, one of my favorite players to have in fantasy baseball is Nick Castellanos. He goes to the Cincinnati Reds on a 4-year, $64 million contract. In the previous season, he had 27 home runs, 73 runners batted in, and a .289 batting average. Castellanos plays a lot in the outfield, but he's also a utility player. You can put him at third base. You can put him in the shortstop position. He can play really any position. Another reason why I love him in fantasy baseball, on top of his sleeper status and the amount of numbers he puts up. Castellanos to the Reds is really good. It's great. They added Trevor Bauer there as well in Cincinnati. So I think Cincinnati is finally trying to get out of their rebuild, and they're trying to get some excitement in that fan base that hasn't had a lot in a while. And the Reds clearly want to contend next year, and this is one of the bigger moves they've made to do that.
Agreed. Nicholas Castellanos, he had a really rough start with the Detroit Tigers to the last previous season, but then he got traded to the Cubs and he just went off. He had many home runs and RBIs. He was so good. I had him on my fantasy team and he did me wonders. I was so happy to have him, but he really shined as a member of the Chicago Cubs, which is at the time last year, it was hard to shine on the Cubs because of how underachieving they were. Even though they had such good players, they still just couldn't break the barrier, but he was really good.
I think it's important to mention in such an important episode of the Best of 7 podcast that I believe I've won the championship in our baseball league back-to-back years, no flex, just the fact that I've won the league back-to-back years. I'm basically Billy Bean with World Series rings. That's it. Back-to-back. I can't hear you. The rings are clogging my ears. No big deal. I think that's a good segue, though, because I'm the World Series champion of our baseball league. But you are the runner-up. And no,
I was the runner-up for both of those years, and it was close both times. I think I need to launch an investigation. I think I heard some trash can banging over there, so we'll have to.
No comment. No comment.
And continuing on with the Reds, they signed third baseman Mike Moustakas, another addition into that hitting core that they're trying to revamp. 35 home runs, 87 RBIs. He had a really good season last year. The deal is 4 years. He is guaranteed $64 million. He can be another piece to a potentially good Cincinnati Reds team, whether it's this season or next season. I could see it happening where the Cincinnati Reds make that step because there's not a lot of expectation on the Cincinnati Reds right now.
I think Cincinnati is one of those teams that we mentioned a lot of these teams in this free agency thing. You know, with the limited amount of spots that are open to make the postseason in baseball, a lot of these teams are going to have the same card. They're trying to take the next step, or they're trying to burst the bubble and get out of mediocrity and go into the postseason. Teams like that are the Rays, and teams that are trying to take the next step are the White Sox, Reds, Blue Jays, etc. I think, firstly, the Blue Jays wanted Mike Moustakas, offered him $30 less million, so there's a reason why he signed with Cincinnati. He's a phenomenal raker. Mike Moustakas is a great addition to that infield. Scooter Gennett already and Joey Votto. I believe their shortstop is also a young guy that's pretty good. Their outfield's looking nice. Their pitching's questionable, but hopefully if it holds on, Trevor Bauer, a former Cleveland Indian, hopefully he does well. But the Reds, you know, I don't think they're going to make the postseason. I don't think they're going to be the third team to miss out, like the first team out of the wildcard spot. They'll certainly be a 75-80 win team, in my opinion, but I just don't think they have the pitching to really contend against some of those top teams in that league.
Not yet, and I think, but next postseason or even on the draft or even by trades or whatever, if they can focus their attention, because they have some really good hitting pieces on that team, but if they can focus on the pitching core now, whether it's the bullpen or the starting rotation or both, please both, then they can really start to be a dark horse contender in the 2020 postseason or after. But in the last free agency move that we'll be talking about, Marcell Ozuna, left fielder, going to the Atlanta Braves. They lost Donaldson. They gained Ozuna, who's a good hitting piece. And now he had 29 home runs, 89 RBIs, a really solid season for Marcell Ozuna. It was a little bit off from when he broke out with the Miami Marlins a couple years ago, but he's been that story is just terrible. But
that Miami Marlins outfield of Yelich, Stanton, Ozuna, and the fact it got broken up and the fact they didn't get any postseason chances, that's heartbreak if you're a Miami fan. Holy cow. How?
I don't understand. It's just crazy. Like, they've let so many pieces go, and you even go to like D Gordon on that team. Also, he's also out, and that's just a depressing franchise right now. They've gone through a lot. Those fans have gone through a lot. They
have. It's just crappy ownership. That's where it comes. Sort of like us SENS fans, we can understand. Not to the extent of Marlins fans, because I think you've got blown up 3 times already. But, for Marlins fans. But for the Braves, you're getting a guy that can hit some home runs, get you some RBIs. The defense is a little sketchy. He is a good defender, but I can't shake out that play where he jumped on the wall and the ball was like 20 yards in front of him, or like just before the warning track. He jumped on the fence and the ball hit the field before the warning track. He's still a good defender, but that play always makes me laugh. I think this 1-year, $18 million contract shows that the Braves like him, but they're not sold on him. They don't know if he's going to be able to continue the trend of good play. So this is a test contract. If he does well, expect a multi-year deal for him for sure. Moving forward now, let's talk about the hypotheticals. Is baseball going to return this year? Are we going to have baseball? Is it going to be in Florida? Is it going to be in Arizona? Is it going to be empty stadiums in all the cities hosted by teams? We shall see. But right now, it looks like, according to Ken Rosenthal, the only plan that can see baseball returning in 2020 is the Arizona plan, where all players are quarantined together in the state of Arizona, where there's a lot of stadiums and training facilities close to each other where they can play games without fans on MLB regulation fields. I think baseball will return, especially with speedy testing coming very soon in May. It's expected when that should be available for everybody, which would be huge into reopening the league during this pandemic. But according to Ken Rosenthal, it's Arizona or nothing. So hopefully it happens. But honestly, we shall see. We shall see, right?
Yeah, I just hope they don't rush it too much.
Yeah,
like,
51st.
We're already talking about like it being guaranteed of having stadiums with no fans, which in sports is like unheard of. So now that we have that, now we're having all the players in one like state. For me, I just hope that they don't rush it too much. We do love our sports. We do really want our sports back, but we want to make sure that we're staying safe first. And if we do get our sports back, it needs to be like actual sports, because you don't want to look back 20 years in history and be like, oh, this blank team won the World Series. Oh, but it was in this weird like
shortened half inning
MLB season. Yeah.
I get what you mean. I just think as long as it's safe, as long as it's healthy for the players, and as long as it's plausible and not putting too many strains on resources for health professionals, and if the players are okay with it, or a majority are okay with it, then I don't see the problem. It just happens to be that we got to make sure that this is safe. We got to make sure the players are on board. We got to make sure the resources are available to health professionals before we consider sports coming back, because the safety of the people that are fighting this deadly disease is much more important than baseball returning. I completely agree with you. We love sports, but health and safety come first.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about some postseason 2020. Do you want to start with that?
Yeah, exactly. Before we talk about the postseason, actually, let's talk about the guys that are going to be contending for first overall. I'm talking Kansas. I'm talking Baltimore. I'm talking Detroit. Noah, who's going to be the bottom of the league this year?
I mean, you can't go wrong with Baltimore. They just have a really good ability to be really crap in baseball. They've had a really bad team for a decent amount of years now. They haven't had a lot of hope. They've had some real mediocre pitching and hitting. They've had a decent amount of hitters, but they're just stranded because of that terrible pitching core that they've had over the past 5 or 6 years or so now, ever since they went to that wild card round a few years ago.
It's the Blue Jays.
Yeah.
Edwin walked it off with the Edwing.
Yeah.
Off. Baltimore is really unfortunate because that ballpark is beautiful. Camden Yards is one of the most pretty ballparks in Major League Baseball. So it's a shame to see nobody in it before the COVID-19 and now, of course, after. But it's also unfortunate to see terrible baseball being played there. But that is necessary to build a contender again. Baltimore, it's either them or Detroit that are going to be the worst team in Major League Baseball. With Whit Merrifield and Mondzelli and everyone in Kansas, they have some nice players in Kansas. They should be one of the worst, but not the worst. Baltimore, I completely agree. They aren't good. They aren't going to be good for a while. Get used to it, Baltimore fans. You guys have to go through a big rebuild and hopefully kill off that Chris Davis contract before you can think about World Series.
That's abysmal. That's such an abysmal contract. I'd say a dark horse for first overall. I'd give it to the Colorado Rockies because if they trade away Arenado, you look at Charlie Blackmon, he's not going to want to stay on this terrible team. And past that, they don't really have much. So if the Colorado Rockies trade away Arenado, I think they can plummet right down to first overall.
Now, we spoke a little bit about those teams because we want to mention, of course, the last place teams. And now let's talk about the teams in the bubble, mediocre teams. We're talking about teams like Philadelphia. We're talking about teams like maybe even the Red Sox, the Rays, maybe the Blue Jays, Arizona, Angels. Noah, who are the bubble teams and who should shock people and who should make people upset by falling short of expectations?
I mean, if you look at the Philadelphia Phillies, I don't like that. I don't like the plan that they have. Their plan is just to throw money at free agents. They did the same thing as they did last year, except they didn't get this superstar talent like they did last year when they got Bryce Harper. But I don't see it in Philly. I think they have a chance only because of the manager switching, but I really wish they had a little bit of a combination between free agents and homegrown talent, I guess, from their farm systems. But right now it's looking like a lot of free agent pickups, and I don't know if all those personalities are going to mesh with each other well. We'll see. If I had to make a prediction, a safe prediction for me is that the Phillies are going to disappoint again.
I can't disagree. That bullpen is it's way too suspect. You know, the bullpen is just doesn't inspire any confidence for me whatsoever. And overall, the Phillies are a team that has disappointed year in, year out. I hope they don't, because I like that team. They got some nice players, and they got some players that are likable. I don't like Philadelphia too much as a sports fan, but as a baseball fan, it'd be nice to see baseball in Philadelphia because those fans are some of the craziest in the league. Other teams that are on the bubble, I put the Mets in there. I put teams, the Twins, are they going to be able to beat out like the Rays and Angels, etc.? Now, the Mets, the Twins, I think the Twins are going to make the playoffs. I think the Mets should with that the bullpen's nice, but the starting rotation should. I think, Noah, we should really look at two teams that are really intriguing coming out of the American League. We have to take a look at the Los Angeles Angels, the Tampa Bay Rays, and the Arizona Diamondbacks. Three of these teams are doing similar things. Tampa Bay is coming out of nowhere, doing really well and competing in the AL East. Arizona, everyone thought they were going to rebuild last year, ended up hitting a bunch of home runs and contended for playoffs. And, of course, the Los Angeles Angels, best baseball player in the league, and, of course, a superstar third baseman. Those three teams are interesting. Can we see one of those three teams making the postseason? I say yes. Noah, what do you say?
I'd say yeah, for sure. I think the Rays really can make it. Like, they've been building that young core. They've been building a lot of pitching, and I like the way that they've been building their roster. I didn't like when they had to trade Emilio Pagan, their relief pitcher, who was basically their closer. They traded him to the San Diego Padres. But I still think that they could be a really good team. They still have really good pitching. They're in a hitters-friendly ballpark if they play there. And I think that they're on the rise for sure, and they've wanted to recap that glory that they had when they won the World Series back a few years ago.
I think for Tampa Bay, I think it's their starting rotation that really makes them the team out of those three to make the postseason for the first time in like 9 or 10 years. Tampa Bay's starting rotation of Blake Snell, Tyler Glasnow, and Charlie Morton is just absolutely filthy. And then you add on to a solid outfield with like guys like Austin Meadows, and you got solid infielders, a really good bullpen. On a tight budget there in Tampa Bay, this team in a depleted AL East where the Blue Jays probably won't make the postseason. Baltimore's crap. The Red Sox are kind of in lingo. We don't really know what they're going to do. The Rays could take advantage here and steal one of those wild card spots as the Yankees are going to win the division. I say the Rays out of those three should make the postseason, and if it's not the Rays, it should be Arizona. I think the Angels, like we said, just don't have enough pitching to get it done when the time matters.
Yeah, I say the same thing. Arizona also has really good odds to make it out and get a wild card spot. They could be a really good team. They made a lot of moves, and they've always been on the bubbles. So maybe if one or two of those moves, if they shine or exceed expectations, I'd look out for the Arizona Diamondbacks.
Now let's take a look at teams that are pretenders, teams that are claiming to be contenders. Experts are claiming to be contenders, and their fans are claiming to be contenders. But we all know they're probably going to fall short. They probably don't have enough talent, or they're just playing okay, but not fantastic. Who are those teams, Noah?
I'd say an underrated one of those teams for me is the Mets. I have not been convinced of what the Mets have been doing. I know that they have a really good young hitting core. They got Jeff McNeil, obviously Pete Alonso, and they have good pitchers like Syndergaard and DeGrom. Unfortunately, there have been, firstly, injury problems in that pitching core. They lost Zach Wheeler, and that's just depth that they've lost. And they're in a pretty tough division of teams that are in the same exact situation as them. They're with Philly, they're with Atlanta, so that's not going to be easy. And especially they're with Washington. That's the best team of all of them. And I could see the Mets being at the bottom of the division just because that's
a hot take.
I don't think they measure up. I don't think they measure up.
Oof. Starting to sweat. That was a hot take. The Mets, the bottom of the division, ladies and gentlemen. That is Noah Luden right there. I think the Mets, I completely agree with them being in the pretender card where that I can't keep on saying bullpen. That rotation should be good enough to put that team to the World Series. It did 5 or 6 years ago against Kansas, but for some reason, just kidding. We all know why. Management futility is the reason why they're not making the postseason. Or if they do, they're not going far. That rotation should push them there, but I just don't think it will. Other pretenders, you can put, this is going to be my hot take, I guess. My friends, the drummer boys, the Houston Astros, I think they're going to do well in the postseason. I think they will make the postseason. But I think because of all the hate that they're going to receive, and they would have received if fans were in the stadiums, I just think overall, with the fact that they don't know what's coming to them, I think they should regress a little bit, considering they're not cheating anymore. So, Noah, let me know if you agree with that, but I think the Astros will make the postseason, but they're not going to be one of the best.
I tend to disagree a little bit. I don't think necessarily the hate is going to get to them. They're sports players. They get tons of hate. I don't think that's going to be much of it. I think that if one team takes it a little too far, because a lot of teams have been throwing pitches at the Astros.
Every game?
But if they take it a little too far game-wise, they can – I wouldn't be surprised if there's one game where the Astros are down and one player gets hit and the Astros make a rally because one guy got on base. I don't like the idea of hitting players it's a hindrance against your team. But I want to go back to the Mets. I want to take a step back here. I'm actually going to give them fourth in the division because Miami is a lot worse than all of those teams. But I just – when you look at Washington and Philly, the Mets fourth. Fourth for me for the Mets. But I will say for the Astros, I think they're going to be still a really good team. They were a really good team. They were a good team in away ballparks. They were where allegedly they hadn't been cheating. They were really good in the playoffs where, again, allegedly they hadn't been cheating or they hadn't been caught of cheating. But they have a lot of talented players. Jose Altuve, Carlos. They have such a stacked team still. But I get what you mean. They don't have that advantage, and they have a lot of teams that are wanting to get some revenge, especially the Dodgers. If they somehow met the Dodgers in the World Series, I would give it to the Dodgers 100%.
For sure. I think the Astros are definitely contenders because of the amount of talent they have. I just think they don't have the advantage anymore. They were in Game 7 against the Yankees. They hit a walk-off. How do you think that happened? There was rumors that he had a buzzer on Jose Altuve had a buzzer on his shoulder, and it looks like he did. Their MLB is denying it, but it looks like he did, to be honest. Why else would you not want to take your shirt off when you have like a 30-pack? Like, come on. Overall, come on. Yeah. The Nationals, he's saying he's embarrassed. Give me a break. The Astros are a good team. I don't want them to do well. I hate every single one of them. Unfortunately, I used to love Alex Bregman, but I just hate the whole team now. But the Astros, they're going to make the playoffs. They're going to do some damage, but they just don't have that advantage. I think the teams like the Yankees and the Dodgers definitely have that step over them, without a doubt.
They do. I have been going back to the Mets a little bit, but I want to make one more point that they had a manager in line, Carlos Beltran.
Yes. But
then they had to make a panic move and let him go because of the whole Houston Astros scandal. So that's another reason for me to put the Mets lower. They don't have they didn't get their guy. Their guy isn't on the team anymore. So I think that's the other reason for the Mets, but we'll move on from the Mets. I want to talk about the Texas.
Still sweating from that take. Wow.
I want to talk about the Texas Rangers a little bit.
As a pretender?
I say that they could.
I might have to take my shirt off. I am sweating.
I don't know. Baseball's in a really good situation right now where they're, especially with the Astros getting dethroned by their cheating scandal. I'd say that the baseball is one of the sports that is actually in a really good position because there are a lot of teams that can make it. It's not like what the NBA used to be a couple of years ago where you knew the top 3 or 4 teams, the other guys were going to get there and subsequently lose. But I'd say in baseball, like Texas, if they can make it out of their division, they could be a decent team. Like they're with the Mariners, they're with the Angels, they're with Houston and Oakland. And if Houston, like you say, if maybe they even falter more and maybe the cheating was the root to all of their success and their players actually aren't that good, Texas can just sneak into the wild card because I think Oakland will win that division. But I think Texas can be number 2. But and to shift that conversation, the AL West, Oakland with Frankie Montas coming back, they kept a lot of their really good players.
What are the teams in the AL West?
AL West: Houston, Oakland, Texas, the Angels, and Seattle.
Oh, that is one of the best. Seattle last for sure, but that is one of the best divisions in baseball, without a doubt. It's one of the best.
I'd say for me that's a hot take. For me, that's a hot take. There's a lot of regressing teams and a lot of disappointing teams in that one. But.
Well, I think when I look at that division, I look at a division with teams that all have potential and have the legitimate chance to win a World Series. That's what I look from that.
Yeah,
you can make the case for all 4. The Seattle, no, you can't make a case for Seattle.
Yeah, obviously Seattle had a quick up and down. They went like 10-0 or what was it? They were like 6-0 to start the season, and everyone's like, all right, Seattle's winning, and then they just plummeted to the bottom.
It always happens. A midseason collapse for Seattle is a constant there with them and that fan base. Let's take a look at some contenders now. I'm talking Dodgers. I'm talking Yankees. I'm talking Nationals. Yes, maybe even the Astros. I'm talking Twins maybe. I'm talking Oakland. Who are your contenders? I'll say mine first, actually,
Sure.
and then I'll let you finish. I think the three teams, in my opinion, that have a really good shot of making the postseason, not making the postseason, of winning the World Series is the Dodgers, the New York Yankees, and I have to give it between the Nationals and the Twins. I think the Twins have a lot of power, and they just added another elite player to that team to hit some home runs. The pitching's a little shaky, so it's questionable there. The Nationals, they're looking to win back-to-back years. You have to mention them. I think the two legitimate teams, the top dogs in the Major League Baseball world, it is the Los Angeles Dodgers, and it is the New York Yankees, without a doubt. In fact, it's funny. I have a Brooklyn Dodgers jersey, baby blue, Jackie Robinson on the back, beautiful jersey. What's funny about that is Brooklyn, New York, Dodgers, Los Angeles. It's funny. But I think those two teams are the teams that are going to be the contenders, the top teams, the ones that everyone expects to make the World Series. Now, usually that doesn't happen. The top teams usually don't make the World Series. That only happened a couple of times, like Houston and Los Angeles a few years ago. But I think if you had to put money on a team, it's either the Dodgers or Yankees, in my opinion.
So I will agree that the top dogs right now are obviously the Dodgers and the Yankees. But you know how I don't like to abide by the normal projections. I'm gonna throw a contender in there that's in a division that's pretty tough, considering that all of the teams technically are competitive, maybe except for one. I'm gonna say the Atlanta Braves.
Ooh, that's a good one.
They're a really good team. Phenomenal
Like
hitting core. Absolutely great hitting core. They have Acuna. They have Friedman. They have Albies. They're so good. They've made
I messed up.
all
Right.
season. They have great pitching. Canadian Mike Soroka is
baby.
there. I think the Atlanta Braves, you have to watch out for them, because especially if teams like the Mets and Philadelphia falter, you can have Washington and Atlanta from the NL East in the postseason. And I'd say Atlanta, if I wanted to make a World Series prediction, which I think is a good way to end this episode, I'll say my World Series, the New York Yankees will make it, and the Atlanta Braves will face them. And I think overall, the New York Yankees will finally – no, they're not going to win. It's the Braves. It's the Braves. The Braves are going to win the World Series.
I think that is one of the first takes you've ever made where I will have to agree. I think if you put the Yankees and Braves together, I think the Yankees are the obvious – ones that everyone expects, and obviously the Braves are the underdogs, but I completely agree. That hitting core in Atlanta is legit. That pitching is legit. That bullpen is legit. They need to take the next step. Hopefully they get over that Game 5 loss against the St. Louis Cardinals last year. The Braves, I agree, they're one of the teams that not enough people are talking about, because that team is a legitimate contender. I'm glad you really brought that up. Noah, why don't you tell people where they can listen to us, watch us, and follow us?
So first, you can follow us on social media, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all of it at SENS Talk Podcast. Then if you wanted to listen to the episodes, obviously watching on YouTube, but then you can listen on Spotify, SoundCloud, Apple Music, and Google Play at SENS Talk Podcast. We're on all those streaming platforms, and we really appreciate all the support that we've been getting the first few episodes of the podcast.
For sure. And I want to mention, if you haven't already, make sure to check out episode number 4 on all the previous platforms. And of course, here on YouTube, if you're watching here on YouTube, at SENS Talk is the channel. Make sure to subscribe, click that red button and make it gray. Brandon Mackey joined the show in episode number 4, so make sure to check that out. Noah, any final comments before I wrap things up?
I just want to say that, I don't think the Blue Jays are going to make the playoffs. Sorry, Canada. But they'll be good in a couple of years, just not this year. It's not yet. Not yet.
It's the first. This is going to be the first step to real contention. I agree. I think the Braves, the teams you mentioned, are interesting, and I think the Mets. Your hate for the Mets, pardon me, is definitely making me sweat a lot, because that is the hottest take I've heard. And I watched Stephen A. Smith. I've seen Skip Bayless on TV too, and that was one of the scorching hot takes I've ever seen live. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for checking out episode number 5 of the Best of 7 podcast. Remember to follow us everywhere and check us out on all our streaming platforms. We will see you next week for a draft recap of the National Football League. We may or may not have Giordano Ladisa, our producer, join the show. We may or may not as well have a draft expert of the National Football League join the show as well. Stay tuned for that. Besides that, this is episode number 5 of the Best of 7 podcast. We hope all y'all watching this stay safe, stay healthy, and of course, stay home. We'll see you next week. Thank you for watching. This is Brandon Platt for the Best of 7 podcast. We'll catch y'all next week.